Coming up, how will the Nets' bold draft strategy impact the team's future? I'll answer that after this.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. This show is 100% free on all those great platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And on today's show, I'm going to be analyzing the Nets' bold draft strategy that saw them select 5 players in the first round. I'm going to talk about how the type of players that they targeted could indicate a change in philosophy moving forward and how it could also impact the team's timeline. Joined now by Brian Lewis of the New York Post. And Brian, we are still dealing with the fallout from what was a crazy draft night in Brooklyn last night. The Nets obviously setting a record, taking 5 players in the first round. No other team had ever done that before. So let's start there. We, knew about the volume of picks that the Nets had, and it had been floated leading up to the draft, like in the hours right before, that they might be comfortable making all these picks. How surprised are you that they actually made 5 first-round picks? Because when they had 4, it was a lot of people thought they were going to have to consolidate, trade up. Then they got another one and still made all the picks. So how surprising was that to you?
Oh, it was, I was stunned. I mean, I'll just, full disclosure, I just thought they were lying. There's no other way for me to put it. I thought it was a smokescreen. And I even said, listen, if I was a smart GM and I had picks and I was looking to move, whether that was move up or, punt one into next year or consolidate or whatever, I probably would say, oh, I'm very comfortable making all of these picks. And then I would casually mention how great my development staff is and how we're so my coach can't wait to get his hands on all 5 young guys. That's what I would be saying. So that's what I thought they were doing. I thought they were just simply protecting the value of those picks before they moved one or more of them. But I was wrong.
And
clearly wrong.
And, I think the fact that they did stick in make all the picks, there's 2 things. I do know that they were they were at least inquiring about trading up further into the top 10. They had spoken with Philadelphia. I know they spoke with Charlotte, as numerous other teams did. Those teams, obviously the price was too high for them. And then when you look at potentially moving into the late lottery was something people had been talking about. And you look at a team like that made the biggest move.
I want to give you credit too, because I didn't know about Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
I knew San Antonio, I knew Philadelphia, and then I think you reported Charlotte.
Yeah, numerous teams were talking to Charlotte. Like I've heard that. Yeah, they were a team that was seriously considering moving back, and I thought maybe they were waiting to see whether Philly stood there and took VJ Edgecombe, because they were said to have interest in Edgecombe. Charlotte was, and the Philly took him, but they seemed very comfortable taking Knipple. Nets fans' favorite guys, who they would have been so upset with at 8, ends up going 4. So what does that say? But talking about them potentially moving up into the late lottery, the team that made the biggest move, New Orleans, went from 23 to 10, and they paid a steep price. They gave up their 2026 first-round pick unprotected, which a move that's getting somewhat killed. Like, I think a lot of people rightfully think that was kind of a crazy move. But that just shows what the price might have been to move up. And clearly, the Nets might have thought that was too exorbitant, based on where they had guys ranked on their boards and how the draft was playing out. So that was one part of it. The next part of it that I want to get into with more detail is making all 5 of these picks seems to be part of a strategy that the Nets were, going with, of potential just high volume, multiple dart throws, giving themselves the highest chance to come away with maybe multiple, rotation guys out of this class. And I think that was also exemplified in the fact that they took 3 point guards, all who have pretty similar traits. They do some things differently, but in Yegor Dem, Nolan Traore, and Ben Saraf, all, pass first guys, very talented, very unselfish, all struggle shooting from 3, but have some upside if certain things can hit. So it seems like they're playing the volume game overall, and then also with really wanting to get a high-level lead ball handler and targeting guys with similar traits who they thought could hit. So how do you feel overall about that strategy? Because I think a lot of draft people were scratching their heads seeing them take 3 international point guards. But there is, obviously some logic to it in the sense that they're trying to maximize their chances at, that archetype of player, them coming away with one who hits.
Yes. Well, what I would say is this, general managers, like, people in the dating pool, have types, right? I mean, Masai Ujiri likes these long-armed, athletic, borderline anthropomorphic, like octopi. Like that's what he goes for, right? Sean Marks has generally gone for, high character Boy Scout guys. I personally, I have said I think they need more dogs in the locker room, and I've said this for years, but whatever. I think now he is added to that type, maybe after watching the NBA Finals, but I mean, clearly going for high feel, high BBIQ passers, guys that can move the ball and are not ball stoppers. It's interesting, and I don't generally do hypotheticals. I'm curious if they had managed to be able to move up to get, not that I ever thought they had a chance for it, but if they'd gotten a Dylan Harper, I wonder whether you would be taking dart throws at 3 or 4 point guards. I don't know. But clearly, they are leaning into trying to find as many chances to have a high-end, homegrown lead passer, right? That's clearly what they're after. We'll see how many of these come good. We may have to wait years to figure that out. But I mean, I think the plan, you can say what you want about it for better or worse, but the plan is pretty clear, crystal clear.
And Sean, as you noted throughout his tenure, high character guys always seem to be something that he places a heavy premium on. And then also, likes a lot of finesse players, guys who do certain things. And I think obviously Yegor Demon checks a lot of those boxes, especially from, a personality standpoint. I spoke with him at the combine. We spoke with him yesterday, and everything I heard from people throughout the pre-draft process was that he crushed his interviews and that he's a great kid and is very team first and all that stuff. And then from the encore perspective, he is a little bit more of a finesse guy. Like, he's an incredible passer. He isn't exactly somebody who goes into people's chests, when he's driving to the basket. There might be some stereotypes about him as like the European classic stereotypes, which I think are, kind of getting dispelled now that more Euro players are, becoming so prevalent in the NBA. But when he made that pick, and from what you had heard about Demon throughout the pre-draft process, so, everything that I just touched on, was there a part of you who was like, here we go again, we're doing this again?
When he made the pick or leading into it?
When he made the pick.
Well, I think when he made the pick, my brain probably went blank for a second because I probably was in shock. I mean, I expected them to take him, but I thought they would either be taking him at 19 or be trading up from 19 to take him. I did not expect them to be taking him 8th. But yes, absolutely, there was smoke about them really liking him, being enamored with what they saw, during the pre-draft process, and I guess buying into that the shooting improvement was real. Now, maybe some people don't believe it was real because they have a whole lot of evidence prior to this that he can't shoot. But the Nets clearly bought into the small sample size. Whether that's recency bias or whether they know better, we'll find out.
And I've heard just from some other people talking about the fallout from this pick and, reaching out to me and saying, the Nets are getting killed and talking to people. There were other teams who really liked Yegor, not so far after the Nets. So People were talking about, could they get him at 19? Like that was a projection in a lot of different places. Doesn't seem like he was getting to 19. It doesn't seem like I think it was probably unlikely that he was getting out of the lottery based on things that I had heard. And then I've heard since. And then going, based on the theme of what we're talking about with these ball handlers, the three guys they got, Demon, Traore, Saraf, we said all high feel, all pass first guys, all guys who play a certain way. And Sean Marks said some things about that in his post-draft press conference that I think will be interesting when you're trying to evaluate how the Nets want to play moving forward with Jordi Fernandez. So we'll talk about that after a quick break. But before that, want to tell you about our friends over at Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you decide you want to be in the stands. That's where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to the first pitch. They've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Game Time has last-minute tickets and zone deals for big savings, like 10% off exclusive zone deals for FIFA World Cup matchups. Say you like some soccer, you want to go watch those games. Game Time's got you hooked up with the zone deals. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Coming back from the break, talking with Brian Lewis about the Nets 2025 draft haul, specifically 3 international point guards that they brought in. We all know the characteristics by this point. I've talked about it multiple times already, even though the draft just ended. High feel, playmakers, somewhat finesse guys, but pass first guys. And that was something that Sean talked about in his quotes. He had one really interesting quote, I thought, that I brought out using an article, and I posted it on Twitter right before this. He said 0.5 second, like, was this the phrase that he used? Like, in that meaning, you don't hold the ball, you're pass first, you get rid of the ball keeps moving. And that seems to be something that is going to be, there's going to be a heavy premium placed on that under Jordi Fernandez, which is obviously much different than what we saw with, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant and some of the ways the Nets have played in the past, just by having some of those star guys, even with Cam Thomas more recently, where there was a lot more ISO ball and stuff like that. It seems like ball movement, unselfish play is going to be a core principle of the Nets moving forward. And I thought that some of the comments that Sean made were interesting in regard to where they're going. What did you make of them?
Agree wholeheartedly. Listen, they really haven't drafted guys like that. I mean, I'm trying to think of the best playmaker that they drafted since he's been here. Now, I'm not saying they haven't had playmakers. I mean, they traded for D'Lo, not the second time. I mean, the first time. And I consider him to be a high IQ player.
They haven't drafted any playmakers since Marks has been here. I mean,
and Kyrie obviously is a wizard.
Mm-hmm.
But again, they didn't draft Kyrie. I'm trying to think of the best, and it might be Karis LeVert.
I mean, that's the only one. I mean, if you're talking about playmakers, and he's not even
what I'm saying. Right, this is what I'm saying. This is a departure from what they've done. And so clearly, I mean, and you've seen the stat out there talking about that there were only 3 guys in this whole class that averaged 6 assists per 36 minutes, and all 3 of them ended up getting drafted by the Nets. I mean, that's, if it was 2 of them, I guess, but the 3 is not a coincidence. 3 is clearly you leaning into this being your character and your identity, right?
Yeah,
and people can look at the Nets last year and say, well, what was their character, or what was their identity, or what do you associate them with, or what are they known for? You would struggle to point to an identity and figure out what it is. Well, now they have one. Again, for better or worse, they do have one.
And that might not be so surprising. Looking at Jordi Fernandez, he's a European coach, the school, like the philosophies that he's came up with, that this would be the area and the direction that he's trending. And I think you saw glimpses of it in his offense last season, which was there was not much ISO ball whatsoever, even like high pick and rolls, which are obviously the core play of all NBA offenses. There wasn't even as much of that relative to some other teams. I think transition's a big thing he wants to do, obviously. And then in the half court, a lot of ball movement. He wants to keep the ball popping. And that seems, that's evident in the way that, they drafted with these three guys all having those kinds of skills. Now, they all also struggle shooting from three. So that's going to be a swing skill for each of them. And I think the Nets are hoping with those core traits that they have in terms of pretty good measurables, great in Demon's case, passing ability, natural feel, all of those things, some versatility, that if they can shoot it, it's going to unlock a lot of other aspects of their game. So that seems to be the way that they're going. And Mark's also talked about these guys' size. And, Demon isn't regarded as a, good defender. I think people probably thought he was average, but it seems like the Nets are pretty high in that regard. And it wasn't just the passing and keeping the ball moving. Mark's also talked about, scheme versatility, defensive versatility, being able to guard multiple positions. And that seems to be, I think that this is all interesting, the way they're talking about this coming off the NBA Finals, that we just saw the Indiana Pacers and obviously the Oklahoma City Thunder, but go really far with a philosophy that was a lot of ball movement, having a lot of defenders everywhere. And it seems like there could be like a little bit of a modeling going with how the Nets want to build this out moving forward.
I would agree with that. The only, I guess, caveat, or the only nit that I would pick would be, I do agree that it's a swing skill for all of them, but I think there's levels to this, and I think it's more of a swing skill for Demon than it is for Traore, right? Because Traore can still drive. I think he's, first off, I think he was over 30%. Not that that's good, but he might have been 31%, 32%.
Like 30, between 32 and 33, I think. Yeah.
Right. And he can still get to the 10. Right. So I think if he just makes even a moderate improvement, that's fine. I think Yegor needs to improve dramatically, because I don't want to be disrespectful and say non-athlete. Let's say middling athlete.
I think that's fair.
He couldn't get by anybody in the Big 12 at all. And I think a guy shooting 27%, he's going to need to shoot to open that up. He's going to have to shoot. Otherwise, I don't see how he scores. I don't see an avenue for him being an NBA scorer if he doesn't shoot. Now, again, he hurt his knee. He was shooting about 38% before he hurt his knee. He misses a month, he comes back, and he shoots about 23% the rest of the way. Now, I don't know. I don't know how much of that is the knee, how much of that is playing poor competition, and you're beating up on Little Sisters of the Poor, and you're shooting 38% against them. And then when you're playing in the Big 12, which may not quite have been the SEC this year, but is damn good, I don't know how much of it was the competition. Also, he had a great pro day.
The Nets seem to believe in the early flashes, the form. They have some shot doctors on their staff, obviously. They seem to believe in what they saw at the pro day and what they saw in workouts. And I agree with you that, the three-point shooting is going to be huge for him in a lot of regards offensively, because, I'll say, you said, he couldn't get by anybody. I don't think he could create separation. Straight line, I don't think that he's slow by any means. Like he has
he's a strider.
He's got great stride length and size. So when he got openings, he was able to take advantage and get to the hoop and finish with his length. The problem was creating those openings. He's not very quick side to side. He's not a great ball handler. That limits how he creates the opening. So another way, there's really a couple ways you're going to create openings. The pick and roll is going to be a huge thing because that's where he's most gifted passing. And if you want to, force defenders to work over the top of those pick and rolls and create those advantages and create those 2-on-1s going downhill, you got to be able to shoot. You got to be able to force them to go over the top also, to be able to get guys to, maybe respect a little bit of a step back, respect you off the catch, be able to make them close out hard to you. That opens some driving lanes that way without you necessarily having to beat them off the dribble or anything like that. So it's going to be big in that regard. It'd also be huge because, everybody says that Demon's a point guard. There is like some conversation about what, like a lot of people say bigger playmaking wing is another thing that they say.
Secondary playmaker, a wing guy. Yeah. But again, now
you be able to shoot.
Be a wing shooting 24, 25%.
Yeah.
It just doesn't play. Right? I mean, unless you are some kind of whatever otherworldly defender with a 43-inch vertical, like, I don't know, Powell, who, by the way, shot 38%.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know what Demon's best position is, honestly. But I would say this much: if he can shoot 35%, it does change the outlook.
I would say when you draft a guy who a lot of people consider a reach and his really like one true redeeming quality and elite skill is passing the ball, I think you'd want to have the ball in that guy's hands a good amount. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that he's going to be a ball handler, a primary ball handler, which shooting is going to be immensely important for that. But he also has this potential where he could be this really interesting off-ball, playmaking wing. This guy can kind of be a connector for them, but that is going to hinge on him being able to shoot off the catch and do some of these things as well. So the shooting's really a huge skill for him, but I think it's clear the vision of what the Nets were going for here with bigger, high feel guys, playmaking guys who will keep the ball moving, not just with those guys, but also with the abilities that Danny Wolf has. And also Sean Marks confirmed it with his comments with what he said with us. I think that's really interesting. That's really interesting in terms of how they want to play. And I think it's really interesting what these volumes of picks could say for their timeline and for the guys who are already currently on the roster. So we'll get into that after a quick break before closing out the show. But before that, want to tell you about our friends over at Skiims. When I found out Skiims was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. I've heard so much about their quality from friends and family, so I had to give it a try. And let me tell you, it lives up to the hype. I've always had issues with underwear, fit, comfort, or just finding the right style for me. Skiims changed all of that. Their men's line offers something for everyone, from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with perfect balance of comfort and style. Guys, I tried the Skiims 5-inch boxer brief, and I'm hooked. These are perfect for my active lifestyle. They move with me. They never lose their shape. They stay in place all day. Whether I'm working out or just running errands, they're the most comfortable and reliable underwear I've ever owned. Plus, the lightweight material feels amazing, almost like you're wearing nothing at all. Shop Skims Men's at skims.com. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select Locked On Nets in the drop-down menu that follows. Closing out today's Locked On Nets episode, talking with Brian Lewis about the Brooklyn Nets 2025 NBA draft that brought in 5 first-round picks. And Brian, let's start on this. 5 first-round picks, all of which we said that these guys are, I think we all agree that they're developmental prospects. Like, it's going to take a while for these guys to, grow into what they want to be. We've heard, obviously, in the past about the Nets' desire to maybe go star hunting, to maybe, go after a Giannis or whoever along those lines. Now this is pretty interesting because these aren't guys who are going to be like ready-made role players. They targeted 3 ball handlers who have a lot of room to grow. Not exactly the guys that you're going to have around a star that you're trying to bring in and compete now. So how much do you think these volume of picks and who they targeted specifically, what it says about the timeline moving forward?
Well, no, I mean, I would agree that these are all developmental guys. I mean, hell, the guy who's probably the least of a development project is probably Powell, right? I mean,
definitely, without
what
question.
he does plays. I could put him out there now, and clearly his defense will play.
I'll say Wolf is a second, but Powell is clearly
right. But a 43-inch vertical plays now. That he is what he is, right? So he's probably, I don't want to say the highest floor, but I mean, I think he is the closest to realizing what he is going to be already. I mean, as far as Giannis, listen, I mean, as far as I know, he hasn't asked for a trade. He hasn't demanded a trade. They're not looking to trade him. So I fully expect him to be there for some time. And I think the Nets, when you give up the assets and equity that they gave up to get their 26 natural first round pick back, I mean, you're doing that with the whole idea of getting, Boozer or any of those 4 or 5 guys. That's the intent. Now, granted, I'm not, we're not going to go down that whole rabbit hole again. I mean, they could go 0-82 and still draft 5th. But I mean, you gave up all that equity so that you can tank, so that you can get a lottery pick and take your best shot at getting an elite player next year. But as far as trading any of these guys, you're right. These guys, I don't know how many of these guys are going to be ready-made compliments, right, for Giannis.
Yeah, they're not.
Next year. That's not what we're looking at here. We're looking at long-term plays. That's what you're looking at.
And that's what I find interesting, because we have heard, even though the Nets had this volume of picks, even though, they have the ability to tank next year, there have been the questions about, would they want to go after, obviously, Giannis, we already said, or another secondary star, whoever becomes available, and expedite the timeline. Now, does this make it so that they definitely can't do that? No, like maybe they could trade multiple of these guys, or they could be in that route. But I find it interesting because maybe they could have packaged some of these picks. They had 5 and traded into later drafts and had those assets to try to package for a star. Instead, they picked multiple developmental prospects, and like there's levels of developmental prospects. And these guys are guys that, at least the 3 ball handlers they took, it's going to be like quite some time before they're ready to, like we're talking 3, 4, 5 years these guys are going to need. So unless they're looking to move off these guys and package, after picking them and package them for something, this seems to me that would indicate that this is like them committing to an extended rebuild and really doing it and building through the draft, truly for the first time in, how long? Would you agree with that assessment?
I mean, I would agree that it looks like, 2 years. Yeah, it looks like a couple of years. Now, they still do have draft equity. It's not like they have no draft equity going forward. They still have an excess of draft picks going forward. I also can't sit here now and tell you on the 26th of June what's going to be done with Nick Claxton. I can't tell you here on the 26th of June what's going to be done with Cam Johnson. I don't know. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that if Giannis sits there and suffers through a poor season, and we're here a year from now and he determines, all right, I want to be in Brooklyn, that they would not be able to make a move for him. But this is clearly looking at who they picked and the amount of picks that they committed as long-term upside plays. This looks like you are going all in 2 feet forward in a rebuild, like a long-term rebuild.
Like to close it out. I'm glad you brought up Nick Claxton, Cam Johnson. I like to close it out talking about what this could mean for the guys who are already on the roster right now. Let's start on those two, because I think, or let's start on CJ specifically, because we have talked about the importance of veteran leadership. Sean spoke. I asked him about, the prospect of trading Johnson at his exit interview, and he raved about CJ, everything he brings to the table, what he brings from a leadership standpoint, all that. He now brought in 5 rookies, 5 really young guys, multiple of which are very developmental prospects. So I would think,
at least it's not 6 rookies, because traded the second.
Traded out of the second round. We didn't mention that.
We should mention that
they traded. Shams Charania reported they traded 36 for 2 future second round picks to the Phoenix Suns, which I'm not surprised, because 6 would just be insanity at this point. But yeah, like they have 5 rookies coming in. They're going to need somebody to show them the ropes. I mean, like, I know fans like to discount that of like last year fans were like, we'll play 15 rookies and we'll go 0-82 and like, we don't give a crap and all that. But in reality, there is a value of having guys like that. So I wonder the effect that this has on a guy like Cam Johnson and maybe a guy like Nick Claxton, but more so CJ, because he really was like that veteran voice in the locker room last year. And I think they're going to need at least one of those guys, right? If they're going to have this volume of rookies coming in. And they already have young guys who are, second year, going to be second, third year guys. So what do you think it could say about his future?
One, I would agree with you. Clearly, you need grown-ups in the room. And I don't care how good the player is, right? I don't care how much talent he has. I don't care if a guy's a 5-time All-Star and he's 33. You talk to him long enough, he'll say, oh, yeah, that guy was my vet a dozen years ago or 13 years ago. He taught me the importance of getting in the cold tub, or he taught me the importance of, diet or the importance of this or the importance of staying away from that or building good habits. So it's invaluable. I'm not telling you that it has to be Cam Johnson, right? But the vet needs to play a little bit.
It's got to be somebody. That's
right.
So
it has to be somebody.
And
now,
there's no other
doesn't
option.
Mean that they can't acquire that vet, right, in some other manner. So you could still trade Cam Johnson as long as there are some grown-ups in the room. And they do still have cap space. All right. So could you sign one? Could you trade for a vet and who has less value than Cam and trade Cam? Certainly you could. And Cam, I think, has significant value. So I don't want to sit here and tell the fans that I know to a certainty that Cam will be here all season or that he will be here through the trade deadline. I don't know that. But I do think with 5 rookies, and I think, well, you got what, 3 19-year-olds?
Yeah. You've like the overwhelming majority of the roster is like under 21 years old. So,
right.
And that's like I said after that interview with Sean, and I asked him, he gave those responses. You came on my podcast and I said, based on that, I'd kind of be surprised if he got traded based on the comments Sean made. And then we got closer to the draft. There was a lot of smoke and speculation about Cam potentially being involved for them to move up. And now coming out of it with him not being on the move and then picking this amount of rookies and then not really having like another veteran type of that guy in the room. Like you said, could they acquire another guy and then still trade Cam? Sure. But, just based on the way that Sean has talked about Cam and what he has said, he literally said when I asked him about it, I think it's time for Cam to transition into more of a leadership role.
Sure.
I would be surprised if he got traded. I could be wrong. Been wrong about things plenty of times before with the Nets and other things throughout my life. I would just be surprised if CJ got traded at this point. Claxton, I think that's a little bit of a different story. But last guy I want to touch on is Cam Thomas, because Cam Thomas was the Nets' leading scorer the last 2 seasons. He's a fan favorite amongst some fans. Other fans don't like him probably. But I think it's interesting because they drafted 3 ball handlers, 3 guys who are going to have the ball in their hands. I know that
I would contend.
Yeah, with Danny.
Not to cut you off, but I mean,
no, I agree.
Wolf, I mean, he was essentially a playmaker for Michigan. This whole these big PNR. I mean,
yeah. All right, at least I'll say 3 guards who are going to
have 3 lead guards. Yes.
So, and I think a lot of people, when I say that in regards to how it could affect Cam Thomas's role, are going to come back and say, these guys are all pass first. All we're talking about is pass first. They're scoring deficiencies. Cam can score. That seems like a great fit. I'll say this. I don't think Cam can't play off the ball. He's a very good catch and shoot 3-point shooter. He's a really poor defender. And based on the way that the Nets are talking about these things, like the comment I just said about what Sean Marks said he was prioritizing, he said 0.5 second basketball.
Yes.
You don't hold the ball. You move the ball. That was the one thing he said. The second thing he said was guys who play defense, have defensive versatility, can guard multiple positions. I would ask you, do either of those things sound like a Cam Thomas type player?
No, not at
So
all.
that's all I'm going to say about it. I'm not saying I've said I expect Cam to be back in free agency. I think the Nets won't want to lose him the asset. I think they are the only team, obviously, that can pay him a significant amount. And I think they're going to do it to retain him and see what they have in him more. But I'm just saying, based on the way that we've seen Cam play historically, based on the things that the philosophical direction that the Nets are heading, that it doesn't seem like, obviously, a match made in heaven, which I don't think should be all that surprising given, we know how Cam, what it was like with Cam's playing time early in his career. But I just think that that's definitely like worth noting.
Well, I mean, if you will recall, those were some of Jordy's first mandates to Cam in camp, preseason, first couple of weeks. He was saying, I need you to be more efficient with your scoring. I need you to be a better defender. And I want you to be passing quicker. These are all things, and this was in a season where, let's be fair, they're brazenly tanking. I get it. I'm not going to get into an argument about the success rate of the tank, but the point is, they're tanking. There's no pressure on them. But Jordy is still saying, this is what I need to see from you. I think that will be even more so this coming season. Because now you actually have a number of players that are wired to play the way that you clearly are intent on going forward. So I think, yes, I do expect Cam to be back. I do not expect to see them let an asset walk out the door for nothing, because that's just not the way they're going to operate. But I don't see them bidding against themselves in this process, right? And I see Cam having to make a number of changes in the way he plays.
That's really the key to it. And we're going to close it out on this. Like, I'm not saying that Cam can't do those things. I'm saying up to this point, we have not seen Cam overall. There's not a ton of willingness to, be a passer. Like he'll do it in spurts. But if you just look at the advanced numbers, like I post him a lot throughout this last season, he passes far less to other guard counterparts and guys his size. He's a bad defender. Like there's no other way to put it. He can score the ball with the best of them. He's an elite, guy who can create his own shot and do those things in isolation. He can obviously handle in the pick and roll and do some of those things, but a lot of what we're seeing is trending away from that direction. And if Cam he's going to get a contract and going to be back, but if he's going to be a long-term piece with the team and a part of the plans moving forward, he's going to have to round out those things that Sean Marks named that I referred to, and also what you just said about what were the mandates to him by Jordy earlier that season. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And Brian, appreciate you taking the time. I know you're extremely busy. I'm extremely busy right now, but it's great to hear from you. I'm sure the fans appreciate it. And we'll have some excited stuff. We got free agency. We got summer league. The Nets are going to have, 3 summer league rosters with all the guys that they drafted. So it'll be interesting to see, but thanks for taking the time. That does it for this episode of Locked On Nets. Hope you guys enjoyed the talk with Brian with continuous draft coverage. I'm going to have so much more deep dives on the individual prospects and what it could say for the Nets moving forward. But if you don't already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Also, hit up the YouTube channel. Be sure to like, comment. Anything you can do to engage is much appreciated. But I'll be back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.